Good morning, you're watching A News. I'm Dilek Tuna. Here are the headlines. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says the decision has been made for the full takeover of Gaza. The Netherlands has become the first NATO country to fund a new US weapons initiative for Ukraine, pledging 500 million euros. Texas Democratic legislators flee the state to protest GOP redistricting plan. Israeli media reported that Prime Minister Netanyahu has decided to seize the entire Gaza Strip. His war cabinet is set to discuss the plan on Tuesday.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is reportedly preparing to launch a full military takeover of the Gaza Strip, with multiple Israeli outlets citing senior officials in his office. Channel 12, I-24 News, and others say the decision has already been made, and Netanyahu's war cabinet will meet on Tuesday to discuss how to proceed. The reported aim is to expand the offensive into all parts of Gaza, including areas where Hamas is believed to be holding Israeli hostages. Netanyahu, in a cabinet meeting on Monday, doubled down on his war goals.
We must continue to stand together and fight together to achieve all our war objectives: the defeat of the enemy, the release of our hostages, and the assurance that Gaza will no longer pose a threat to Israel. Later this week, I will convene the cabinet to instruct the IDF on how to achieve these three objectives, all of them without exception.
His office has not officially confirmed the plan. However, the Palestinian Foreign Ministry condemned the reported decision and urged global powers to intervene, warning of further civilian suffering. Pressure is growing both internationally and at home. Protesters gathered outside Netanyahu's office Monday, demanding an end to the war, a comprehensive hostage deal, and scrapping efforts to dismiss the Attorney General. Videos showing visibly emaciated Israeli captives have intensified public anger. Meanwhile, conditions inside Gaza continue to worsen. At least 74 Palestinians, including dozens waiting for aid, were killed in Israeli strikes on Monday, according to local medical sources. Ceasefire talks have collapsed, and Israeli jets resumed bombings near the border.
The humanitarian situation in Gaza remains critical as more hunger-related deaths are reported. Aid continues to enter from Egypt, but concerns persist over its distribution and access. Israel blames Hamas for the crisis and says it's taken steps to increase aid access, allowing in fuel, providing protected delivery routes, and pausing combat operations. Israel's military liaison body says over 23,000 tons of humanitarian aid entered Gaza last week, but many trucks have yet to be distributed. Hamas claims nearly 1,600 trucks have arrived since late July, though some reports suggest looting by armed gangs and desperate civilians is hindering delivery. Previously, we spoke to geopolitical analyst Ilan Skerlom regarding the latest developments with the Israel-Hamas war and humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
I think that this is a crucial point, and I think it's essential to remember the initial objectives Israel set for this conflict. They were very clear at the beginning. First, it was to dismantle Hamas military and governance capabilities. Second, to secure the release of all hostages. And third, to ensure that Gaza could no longer be a launchpad to attack Israeli citizens. So from my perspective, the military campaign almost totally achieved these goals. The Israeli army now controls a significant portion of the Gaza Strip, almost 75 to 80%, and the Hamas military infrastructure has been severely degraded. So from a military standpoint, the pressure is huge and is likely to continue whether we see a partial or a comprehensive deal. So now I think that the real challenge is the political void. While a comprehensive agreement is the ultimate goal for long-term stability, we must not forget, and you say it, the immediate humanitarian crisis in Gaza and the fate of the remaining hostages. These are real urgent issues. So for sure, a partial agreement could be a crucial first step, and it could offer a way to de-escalate the conflict, to get more humanitarian aid into Gaza and secure the release of more hostages. But the critical missing piece right now is a credible political plan for the future governance of Gaza. Without that, any agreement, whether it is partial or comprehensive, it risks being just a temporary issue before the next cycle of violence.
The Netherlands has become the first NATO country to fund a new US weapons initiative for Ukraine, pledging 500 million euros. The aid will include Patriot missiles and spare parts. US Ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, said more countries are expected to join in the coming weeks. The scheme follows President Donald Trump's call for European allies to finance arms shipments for the war-torn country. NATO Chief Mark Rutte urged others to contribute swiftly to meet Kyiv's urgent needs.
The Dutch are just the first of many. You're going to see a series of announcements in the coming weeks. You know, when we announced this facility that allowed our NATO allies to buy U.S. equipment and provide that to Ukraine for their defense, you know, we had a lot of our allies raise their hand and line up. A lot of them are coming together in groups to pool their money and their resources together to provide these armaments and munitions. And so, you know, it's the whole purpose of NATO and what makes this alliance the strongest is this platform we have to communicate amongst allies and to really talk about these issues and come up with solutions.
The European Union is putting a pause on billions of retaliatory tariffs against the United States. The tax hikes were targeting US goods after a new trade accord was struck with President Donald Trump last month, late July.
The European Union will suspend 2 packages of planned countermeasures against the United States tariffs for 6 months, according to a European Commission spokesperson. The decision follows an informal meeting between US President Donald Trump and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in Scotland on the 27th of July. As part of the new deal, the EU will halt tariffs worth 93 billion euros that were due to come into effect this week. The duties targeted a range of US goods, including steel, aluminium, cars, and agricultural products. Trump claims the agreement includes a 15% tariff on EU exports to the US, 600 billion euros in European investment in America, and a massive 750 billion worth of US energy sales to Europe. He had threatened 30% if a deal was not done by his 1st of August deadline. Trade between the 27-member bloc and the United States last year totaled almost $2 trillion. However, the deal has sparked criticism within Europe. Former High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Josep Borrell, described it as politically damaging. He accuses the Commission of caving in to Trump's pressure and compromising the EU's strategic independence. The European Union and several European leaders had warned that if a trade deal with the US was not reached by the 1st of August, the bloc would impose retaliatory tariffs on American goods.
US President Donald Trump vowed to substantially raise tariffs on Indian exports, accusing India of buying large quantities of discounted Russian oil and reselling it for big profits, despite the massive human toll in Ukraine. He didn't specify how high new tariffs would go, which is on top of the 25% duty already imposed. Over the weekend, 2 Indian government sources said that India will keep purchasing oil from Russia despite President Trump's threats. The sources did not wish to be identified due to the sensitivity of the matter. Texas Democrats have stalled state legislation from moving forward over redistricting. Dozens of lawmakers fled the state on Monday to block a Republican-drafted congressional map backed by Donald Trump to boost Grand Old Party chances in 2026. Without a quorum, the Texas House can't proceed. Governor Greg Abbott ordered state troopers to bring the Democrats back. Civil arrest warrants were issued, but lawmakers outside Texas are out of state jurisdiction. Preliminary talks between Cambodian and Thai defence officials have started in Kuala Lumpur, aiming to solidify a week-old ceasefire. The truce followed 5 days of worst border fighting in over a decade, which killed 43 and displaced more than 300,000 people. Malaysia says both sides are finalising terms for a joint monitoring force. The US and China are attending as observers ahead of Thursday's ministerial level meeting. Negotiators convene in Geneva for a critical final push from the 5th to the 14th of August with world leaders and climate scientists. The most controversial issues include capping production, managing plastic products and chemicals of concern, along with financing to help developing countries implement the treaty.
More than 170 countries will gather on Tuesday at the United Nations in Geneva for what's widely considered a last chance round of negotiations on a global plastics treaty. Delegates will restart talks that stalled in Busan last December because the old final session produced no deal.
I want an effective treaty. I want a treaty that ends plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. That's why we're here. We're not here to not get something or to get something that's meaningless. But the reality is also, and this is where, 40 years in this business, the impacts are here and now. And we have to stop this from spiraling out of control.
Countries want binding caps on virgin plastic production, while major oil and petrochemical states like Saudi Arabia, Russia, and even the US push instead for a treaty confined to downstream issues like waste disposal, recycled design, and voluntary action. Scientists warn failing to act could raise plastic production to levels triple by 2060, with catastrophic effects on oceans, climate, and public health.
It's super important because we find plastics everywhere we look, from the deepest ocean trenches up to the Himalaya mountain. So, and also in our bodies, where we look, we find it in blood, in the human lungs, and in the placenta. Even before the babies are born, they're exposed to it. So this just highlights that we really need to get a grip on plastic pollution.
After years of mounting pressure, governments are working to finalise a groundbreaking international treaty to end plastic pollution. It's a historic opportunity, but policy alone won't save our oceans.
Ukraine is preparing to host Turkish President Erdogan after President Volodymyr Zelensky delivered a personal invitation, which Erdogan appears to have accepted. Ukrainian ambassador to Turkey, Nariman Jalal, said in an interview with RBC Ukraine that the key topic of the visit may be the ratification of the free trade agreement between the countries. According to the ambassador, the Ukrainian side is currently actively working on organising the visit of the Turkish president. Jalal said this visit requires significant efforts since there are many issues that hinder its implementation. Armenian authorities have arrested a suspect involved in a major international fraud scheme. The website offered fake investments where more than 1,400 victims from several countries lost millions of dollars after being promised high returns. The organised group behind the scam included at least 144 members, some minors, operating fake investment websites from late 2021 until last year. The suspect now faces charges of large-scale computer theft. Iran says it has entered a new phase in its relationship with the UN nuclear watchdog as the IAEA's Deputy Director General prepares to visit within the next 10 days. But the chairman of the National Security Committee of the Iranian Parliament, Ebrahim Azizi, said that the delegation will not be permitted physical access to any nuclear sites. Our reporter from Tehran has more.
Foreign Ministry spokesman Baghai told a weekly press conference that the IAEA Deputy Director General will be visiting Iran in the next 10 days, while Tehran and the UN nuclear watchdog have entered a new phase of relations. The visit follows Parliament's decision in late June on suspension of cooperation with the agency after IAEA failed to condemn the US and Israeli airstrikes against Iran's civilian nuclear facilities under its safeguards. The spokesman added that the government will redefine its ties with the agency after the upcoming visit and in compliance with the legislation. Earlier, the Beirut-based Al Mayadin TV, quoting unnamed sources, reported that IAEA will be sending a delegation to Tehran soon to review only political aspects of Iran's cooperation with the agency, and that the delegation is not consisting of any inspectors. Tehran has said that it will lodge a complaint against the IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi for his false reports on Iran's nuclear program, which were used as a pretext for the Israeli-US attacks last June. Iran has also vowed a decisive response to the threat by the European powers to reimpose the UN nuclear sanctions in October amid growing calls in Iran in domestic political circles for withdrawal from the Non-Proliferation Treaty. In the meantime, Deputy Foreign Minister Saeed Khatibzadeh said in an interview with the Hong Kong-based Phoenix TV that Iran does not want to cease its cooperation with IAEA. According to IRNA news agency, he said the inspectors left Iran voluntarily. They were not expelled and they will return in coming months. Turaj Shiralilu, reporting for A News TV, Tehran.
China has reached a major trade milestone, dispatching its 20,000 freight train to Europe through the Middle Corridor. The milestone train, loaded with 55 containers, departed from Erenhot railway station in Inner Mongolia. Since its launch in 2013, traffic along the route has surged, doubling from 10,000 trains in 2022 to 20,000 today. Officials say the corridor is not only boosting economic connectivity, but also reinforcing its value as a strategic alternative in the global freight movement. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has called for urgent global and regional support for Afghanistan. He warns that millions continue to suffer under worsening conditions. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
At the launch of the United Nations Regional Center for Sustainable Development Goals in Almaty, Kazakhstan, Secretary-General Antonio Guterres singled out Afghanistan as a priority for international cooperation. He thanked Kazakhstan for its growing support, saying nowhere is the cooperation more urgent than in our support to Afghanistan. Guterres described the challenges facing Afghans, including entrenched poverty, mass displacement, and repeated natural disasters. He said the people of Afghanistan deserve peace, stability, and a better future. He also reiterated the United Nations' demand for full respect for human rights, especially the rights of women and girls, calling for economic self-sufficiency and dignity across Afghan society. The new regional center, launched in partnership with local and international institutions, aims to support long-term development and cross-border cooperation. Kazakhstan, which maintains strong ties with Afghanistan, is expected to play a key role. So far, Afghanistan's authorities has not responded to the Secretary-General's remarks or to the center's launch. But international pressure is growing for more engagement and accountability. The United Nations says solidarity and shared responsibility will be vital for Afghanistan's recovery. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
That's the news from Baku for now. Stay tuned to A News for more updates and have a lovely morning.